Hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Prashanth Southekal. I'm the book author. So we'll get started soon in a couple of minutes, and request everybody to take your seats so that we can follow the timings and we can get things sorted out soon. Okay. So we will start. We'll start the proceedings with Chris doing the welcome speech, and then we have this agenda, a very great agenda. We have Bill Inmon, who is the father of data warehousing. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here in person, but he is on Zoom. So after that, it's going to be Bill Inmon. Then we have an amazing panel discussion moderated by Steve Roswald, the former CFO of Cargill. He's going to have a panel discussion about data is the king and cash is the queen. We have heard about cash is the king, but I have flipped it a little bit and say data is the king now and cash is the queen. I'm not very sure whether Stacy would like it. But being a data conference, I'll go with that. And then after that, I'll give a quick presentation about my book, why I wrote this book, and what is this book all about. And then we have a vote of thanks from Sana, who is with Stanford School of Business. And then we have a raffle, a door prize from Gary Calkins. There's going to be a small trivia, and if you're able to answer that, you will win Gary's book, which is on predictive analytics. And then we have the book signing, dinner, and the reception and networking and all those things. Once again, thank you very much for coming. It's been great working with you in different capacities. A few of you have been my clients. A few of you have been my advisors. A few have been reported to me as well, and I reported to many of those people who are here. Like I reported to Bhaskar almost like 25 years back. And Sana reported to me almost 10 years back, and now she's with Stanford. Okay, thank you very much, and we get things started. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Prashanth. Great to be here, everybody. This is awesome, and it's great to see people from the East Coast all the way from Canada and Florida and California, and people from all over. So I know us and Gary made it all the way from North Carolina, and Gary actually was the one to introduce myself and Alfonso, you see there too, to Prashanth. We moved to North Carolina from New York City when we started Astral Insights during the pandemic, and got connected up with Gary pretty quickly as we were looking to meet local CFOs and financial professionals. And he learned that we were starting a fledgling data and analytics consulting company. We're trying to bootstrap something, and he's like, Prashanth's an expert in data. You guys do data. You should connect. And got connected up, and pretty quickly he became an advisor in our company, very integral part of our board of advisors. Just an incredible person. I think we were flying out here on Sunday on a long 6-hour flight. We're scrolling through LinkedIn, and you're seeing so much of generative AI and all these things that are happening in the world. And you're just getting hit left and right with so much stimulation, so much is going on, and it feels like there's a lot of stress in the world in many ways. And I see Prashanth's post, which is a picture of him and his family in the Golden Gate Bridge. And it's just a beautiful picture, and just kind of reminded me to take a step back and say, you know what, let's be grateful that we're here together, that we're working in such an impactful, exciting field that's really changing the world in many, many ways. And I say that with no exaggeration. So it's really awesome. So I think when you get stressed out, things become a little bit tough, think back to Prashanth and his golden doodle for inspiration. So it's been really great. Glad to be here. I think data quality, it's a very important topic. It's something we deal with quite a bit when we're looking to enact organizational transformation when it comes to data and analytics. And really, data quality is one of those things that can be really pernicious in terms of stopping momentum that you have. You can have the best visualizations in the world and very sophisticated ML models and all of these things. And one wrong number, and you've lost the CFO or you've lost the CTO. And losing that trust early on can really kill momentum when it comes to a lot of these initiatives. So you're going to hear from some of the best, a star-studded panel, as we know, led by Steve here. And then, of course, a great chat with Prashanth talking about our topic. And then, of course, going into networking, cocktails, and perhaps we'll migrate over to watch the March Madness game at some point. So should be good. I'll be quiet. We'll get on with the event. And last but not least, everybody's entitled to a signed copy of the book outside in the art gallery afterwards. So we'll make sure to get everybody a book. Thank you.
Okay. So now we have Bill Inman, who is considered the father of data warehousing. When I was in the university, I had a lot of materials written by him, and I have been collaborating with him when we did many projects together while in AtScale about 3 years back. And since then, we have done quite a bit of projects together. Incidentally, Bill is the one who has written the foreword for the book as well. So, Bill, over to you. Bill, just 1 second. We have some issues with the audio. Is muted? Bill, you are muted. You need to unmute your speaker. I think in this Zoom world, I think you are muted is one of the most common phrases people are using.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, good, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you. First off, it's a real honor and pleasure to be here today. But before I go any further, I want to congratulate Prashanth on the book. It's a real project to write books, and that in itself is something that's worthy of note. It's a life-changing event. I want to say just a few words about book writing itself. Book writing is the way that our profession has thought leadership. Once upon a time, we had product companies that did product leadership through the products that they produced. But as the industry has matured, we have reached a point where the articles and books and speaking in the public is where the thought leadership comes. So it's not only the fact that Prashanth has written the book to be congratulated for, but he's also to be congratulated for the fact that positions him as one of the thought leaders in our industry. It's kind of interesting. I don't know if you know this or not, but I used to work in San Francisco on Market Street, and I spent, I think, 5 years in San Francisco, and I love San Francisco. The only thing I didn't like about San Francisco, and I don't know if it's gotten any better or worse, but is parking. That I used to dread having to park in San Francisco, and I think when I worked in San Francisco, I only had to drive into San Francisco maybe 3 or 4 times. Most of the times I took the train that they had from Mountain View coming in. So San Francisco is a wonderful place, and I'm glad that you were there. Prashanth's book is on data quality, and I think it's only fair to mention one of the original founders of data quality, who's now no longer with us, but that is Larry English. I don't know if you know who Larry English is or was, but Larry wrote the first book on data quality, and Larry was a friend of mine. And I think that the groundwork that Larry set is now being carried on by Prashanth, and it's a very worthwhile thing to do. Data quality itself is one of the burning issues of our world that we have today. When you take a look at AI and ML and data mesh and all of the things that are going on out there, all of them start with the assumption that we have good data. And if you don't have good data, then doing AI and machine learning and data mesh and all of the other things that are going on all falls apart. So I think that it's a good thing for our industry to be able to come in and have more conversations about building the solid foundation. I see that there's going to be food and drink, and I have never been one to turn down food and drink. So have one for me tonight. And I want to end by saying congratulations, Prashanth, and thank you. And we'll be talking soon.
thank you very much for your time, and it was great. Once again, thank you very much for writing the for writing the foreword for the book, and thanks again. So we have the next agenda, which is a panel discussion. So it's going to be moderated by Steve Roswell, who is the former CFO of Cargill and who is also the advisor in my firm. So Steve, over to you, and I request the 6 panel members to come on the stage. Ramesh Sharma, the CEO of Orion Governance, David Mariani, the founder and CTO of AtScale. Then we have Thiago Di Costa, who is the CEO of Toric. Stacy, the CEO of Bluebird Group. Mike Strata, who is the CEO of Arcalia. He was also my classmate at Kellogg School of Management, so we played dual roles. And finally, Sanjeev Mohan, former head of data analytics at Gartner. And then Steve. Steve, over to you.
Yep. Thanks, Prashanth. Well, there is a lot of brain power up here. I felt it last night at dinner. I was amazed, and it was really incredible. I felt smarter when I left dinner, and I didn't say anything. We're well represented in the Bay Area. We have 4 representatives from the Bay Area, and we're well represented by the Midwest. We have a gentleman from Chicago and a woman from Minneapolis here. So Stacy's from Minneapolis, and Mike is from Chicago. So I won't, I'll get right in because I think the exciting part is to listen to these brilliant people talk. So I'll start in and I'll ask questions to specific people, and we'll start with Mike and Sanjeev. So what are the key business challenges today, and how is data analytics going to solve those for us? And Sanjeev, do you want to start?
Sure, I can start. So when I talk to my my customers, there are a few challenges I hear consistently. The first problem is time to value. The amount of time it takes for the businesses to get that data out is just way too long. The second problem is data quality. Third problem is security, reliability, and so on. And the fourth problem is cost. The cost to get that data out is rising tremendously. A lot of these people move to the cloud thinking that, it'll be, we won't have to over-provision resources and everything will be like contained and pay as you go. Instead, they're finding that the cost is unpredictable and just keeps going up. And they're asking, well, what is it that you IT guys are doing? Why does it cost so much? And then the IT people, like myself, we go into deep dive into IT speak. Well, I need to create a lake house and I need to create this DAG and this data pipeline. The business guy goes, wait, I don't understand what you're saying. All I care about is I cannot trust the data. You haven't solved my problems. And this is not sustainable.
Great answer. I've been on the other side of that conversation many times.
You've been a CFO. You have to pay the bills.
I've been there. Mike?
Sure. Can I borrow? Oh, thank you. Yeah, so on the business side of that, and I won't be able to go nearly as deep as he just did, but on the business side, I speak with leaders every month, and the recurring, so business challenges are that they need to decrease risk in the organization and increase shareholder value. In doing so, they focus on their business, right? That's what they're doing on a regular basis. They're not focused, and I love Chris's comment at the beginning because he said, we're in a deluge of information ourselves, right? And we're in the industry. It's a little mind-numbing. Right now, and as of November of last year, when ChatGPT kind of was sprung on the world, they were on a slippery slope of decision-making and kind of drinking from a fire hose. As of November, that slope went from 45 degrees to like 85 degrees. And now they're all sliding down, trying to figure out top from down, left from right on the data side. So I think that the primary challenge that businesses face is that we are deluged with information. They are absolutely underwater and don't know exactly what to do.
Great point. Mike, last night, he kind of apologized for saying this, but he said, we are in a data warfare. Companies are in warfare, and we may want to be transformational, but in fact, we're fighting. And so he really kind of woke the group up last night, I think, with the term warfare, but that's where people are at. This 85% slope, that's where people are at for sure. The next question's for Stacy and Mike. The finance community often says cash is king. and data is queen. Sorry, Stacy, we'll just go with that. But many progressive CFOs are taking the line that data is king and cash is queen. What are your thoughts? Stacy, do you want to start?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm predispositioned, I guess, or clearly biased towards the cash is king position as a CFO. But certainly, Prashanth has made a compelling business case, and he's almost fully convinced me. So we'll see by the end of dinner if others can sway me a little bit further towards the data is king. Absolutely agree that a strong foundation in your data and analytics is critical for integrated business planning. And to me, for cash flow, you must have integrated business planning, whether it be through SIOP in manufacturing or the various acronyms that are industry specific. It all comes down to your cash conversion cycle. So optimizing cash flow is near and dear to my heart, and having the strong data analytics foundation is critical. So I'm at least convinced that they're tied, and we'll see if we sway me all the way to data being king.
So it's still out. The vote's still out on that. Stacy's yet to be swayed. Mike, how about you?
Sure. So thank you. So I absolutely agree. I mean, obviously, I will always be second to Stacy's comments on the finance and the cash side, but I think cash is always going to be royalty. We'll say it that way. That will be the same, but cash data can certainly be king in that you can get, we're seeing 10x to 50x returns on investment, depending on how data is used correctly. So in some ways, you can make the case that data can be king, but to follow the metaphor, data can also become the court jester if not used correctly, right? So many businesses are failing to understand how to leverage it and getting and not having any returns on it. And so I think at times it can make us look foolish if it's not used correctly, if the quality, to tie back to Prashanth, is not there of the data, but cash will always certainly be royalty.
Yeah, good answer. You know, one of the things Prashanth taught me is that data in its initial state is a liability, and we have to make it an asset. And that's that whole idea. It can be the court jester. If you don't really manage it, it can be the court jester. So it's a great point. Great point. This question's for Dave and Ramesh. How does data analytics drive business growth and create value for business and its customers? Dave, can we start with you?
Yeah, so I'm going to just answer that with telling a customer story, because I think that's says it all. So, you know, when we think about data and analytics, when we think about that, we always think about how that affects our internal employees inside of our organization. But I've seen some of the largest business impacts. It happens when you share that data externally with your partners. And so this is a story about the largest home improvement retailer in the United States. I won't say what their name is, but you can imagine what it is. And prior to the pandemic, they invested in sharing their inventory data with all of their suppliers. So they have about 9,000 to 10,000 suppliers. And by sharing that inventory data with them, they really multiplied their ability to make sure that products were on the shelves in the right stores. Because if you think about it, those suppliers have every incentive to make sure that their product is well stocked in all the stores, or else they're losing sales. So now fast forward, you know, after they created that asset, so then their suppliers have a full view through data and analytics, through Excel and through custom applications. They know exactly what products and SKUs are on which stores and what the inventory levels were across the network of this retailer. The pandemic hits, so supply chains goes crazy. And now this retailer happened to have well-stocked shelves and had the products that customers needed. And as a result, they had their best sales numbers ever in their history and their highest profits ever in history. And that's all because they actually used and leveraged their own network of their partners to make sure that the customer ultimately benefited by having, you know, well-stocked shelves.
Great story. Great story. You know, in Stephen Covey's words, that'd be a win-win, right? sharing more with your suppliers and your individuals. That's great. Ramesh?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to be here. But I've got to talk from a personal experience, being on airplanes on a regular basis, and getting status miles. And what I pay attention to is, are they collecting information about my feedback? What kind of analytics in my user experience, right? And looking at, say, the younger generation now who order products on their phones, if they don't get that fulfillment or the satisfaction, is the company really listening to the feedback from the customer? What kind of analytics is being done? Or they're on the risk of actually losing that customer forever. If I've had a bad experience, I've reported something, it doesn't go back, I don't get feedback from that information that I've supplied, that company is likely to lose their market share. And this is the current generation. The younger generation operates more on that. So not collecting information, not doing enough analytics. In fact, there's quite a lot of analytics that needs to be done. Could be the life or death of any kind of vendor out there in the marketplace.
Interesting that the feedback part is really important that frankly I hadn't thought of, but people are always asking you for information, and making sure that you give them what they gave you back and more is really the point. I think that's a great lesson.
And, we're looking at metadata collection, even voice, the way the support person answers the call. If they were rude to you, then most likely I would never go back. So it's important that information is collected and made visible to the higher levels in the organization. If they're ever wondering, why are we losing business? It could be because we didn't stock the right product that's on demand in the right place at the right time. If you made me wait, I'm going to go somewhere else. So I think it's the lifeblood of an enterprise. If you don't have proper analytics and visibility into what's going on.
I'm going to take a segue here because you brought up something that's really interesting for me, and what I've experienced over the past 3 months, some really bad things. So I'm going to have everyone raise their hand if you think customer service generally has gotten better over the past, let's say, 2 years, or worse. So raise your hand if it's gotten better. Panelists, you could raise your hand too. Raise your hand if it's gotten worse. So isn't that interesting? So this is a big challenge for data and analytics, right? Because I would be I had some terrible customer service, and it mostly had to do with the phone. So I don't know how we can fix that, but we've got some experts here, I'm sure, can be all over that. But thank you, Ramesh, for that answer. This question's for Thiago and Mike. What are the typical challenges you have in building data analytic models, especially on forecasting and predictive analytics? And how can technology play a role to solve this problem? Thiago, go ahead.
So my opinion on producing models of any level is that quality of the data is the main problem to get there. I think if you train a model for predicting and you train the model with data from the pandemic era, your predictions will be all wrong now. And if you train with data before the pandemic, they would be all wrong during the pandemic. So it really comes down to like the quality of the data you're putting in and how much can you trust on that data so you can use it for a model, you can use it for analysis of any kind. So, plugging the book here, but I think it's the most important part of any analytics decision, and even things like ChatGPT. I think if you look at what's happening today and how people are approaching that, I think the biggest achievement of these newer AI systems and large language models is really the quality of the data is much higher than the quality of the data of the previous models. So it produces higher fidelity results, higher quality outcomes. But yeah, I'll consider data quality the biggest problem to bring models to fruition.
Okay, great.
We can go to the next question because that's the answer regardless.
Well,
I'm good, thank you.
Mike, we can skip the next question. Okay. Well, I will say, I'll just talk a little about reading about Diego's background and talking about it. He went into the construction industry as kind of I don't know how you decided to go build something when you've been in the internet world and in coding your whole life. But he found that the Excel spreadsheets in the construction industry were so cumbersome, and one Excel spreadsheet would lead to another. One question would lead to another Excel spreadsheet, and that's how he built Thorac. Is thinking, I got to figure out this problem because I can't be working with all these spreadsheets. And data quality became the issue. There was so much data quality issues along the way, but really,
Can I give an example of data quality that
please.
happened to me just
please.
10 minutes ago? So I was sitting outside working on this event where Shamak Degani, who's the creator of Data Mesh, is going to be participating. So this guy told me, I need a bio. I'm like, okay, just go to LinkedIn and just, scrape it. But he wanted me to write. So I'm like, okay, I'm too lazy. I've got too many things going on. I'll just ask ChatGPT, right? How can that be? I asked ChatGPT very confidently. It gave me the wrong answer. Why? Because ChatGPT was trained up till September 2021. Sorry?
You didn't use 4?
Oh, no, I didn't use 4, actually. So, no. By the way, GPT-4 is also trained up to September 2021. Really? Yes. You can check that.
Hey, Sanjeev, I have another example of just that. So if you guys read the Wall Street Journal yesterday, they did something on ChatGPT. So who's the inventor? Who's of OpenAI? Yeah, Sam Altman. So they asked ChatGPT, show me what Sam Altman's bio is, and it was wrong in 2 spots. So and they highlighted it. So look, it's like the thing about trust. If you lose trust in the results of what ChatGPT or any generative AI system spits out, then that's going to destroy it all, isn't it?
So first of all, the quality is bad. Secondly, these new models hallucinate. So for example, if I say, when did Dave climb Eiffel Tower? As an example. Have you climbed Eiffel Tower?
Yes.
You have?
I have, yes.
Okay.
No, I mean, take the elevator.
No. Okay.
Sorry, I did not scale Eiffel Tower.
How about Kilimanjaro?
Absolutely not.
Okay. So if I ask, what these models will do is they start looking on the internet and they'll say, oh, we found Dave Mariani and we found Kilimanjaro and somebody climbed and say he climbed it in 2014. So these kind of answers show up. This is called hallucination, where it's just putting it all together. And the best part is not the best part is it is so confident in its answers. So quality is not important. Confidence is important.
Very interesting, and points right back to the book, right? And that's you guys making good points and doing a good job, I think, making a case for your book, Prashanth. Quality leads to trust, which leads to, I guess, customers, right? This next question is for Dave and Ramesh. Can you please share some light or shed some light on the importance and availability of quality data for data and analytics activities? How do you approach interactions with business stakeholders who have varied definition of business entities, categories, events, and you name it? And start with Ramesh this time.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things that I've been a firm believer is in adding this element of trust in reports. So I'm a little biased because what we do is connect all the assets in the enterprise all the way from source systems to all the intermediate paths as information snakes its way through the enterprise. And one thing that people need to understand is that data quality is not static. Anytime somebody touches a line of code, the outcome could impact the enterprise adversely. But the way people are processing it today, the business has no idea. I call traditional reports as 2-dimensional reports because all they have are business concepts and numbers. You don't really understand the veracity or what's behind that number. So we introduced a concept called data trust propagation. So take data quality all the way from the sources, propagate them all the way to the reports. And you understand, measure as well the flux, the rate of change of sources, what impact it has in the enterprise. So I think the future for business execs is really reporting with a trust element that really plugs in near time to the flow of information in the enterprise but also the change of code, which normally is left to the bowels of the ship or the enterprise, right? That's some guy in IT making changes. But the bottom line here is it can have a life or death experience. Not being able to understand the risk, how what kind of exposures you've had has, caused a lot of banks to fail. And lately, that's been giving us a big amount of uptick. So anybody that you talk to would say, I'd give anything to get trust in my reports, which means data quality, measuring all the other things that change within the enterprise, which is absolutely critical. I don't know if I answered your question, but.
No, that was perfect. That was excellent. A common theme. Dave?
Well, if data can be completely correct, but if people use different names to describe the same data, then you have a lack of consistency, and that destroys trust. So for me, it's all about the semantic layer that drives consistency. You have one way of describing a business term. And when you have that consistency, then people can be assured that they're all speaking the same language. So another story is that I founded AtScale because of my experience at Yahoo. And at Yahoo, we basically had, two metrics that we ran the business on, impressions and clicks. Clicks for ads, impressions for, all of our web properties. And you can't imagine, that sounds really easy, right? Impressions and clicks. How could you get that wrong? Believe me, you can get it wrong. And even though the data started out right, ultimately when it was displayed in a reporting click view or in Tableau or ended up in an Excel worksheet, all the numbers were different. Because, hey, if you have an impression, well, when did you start to collect that impression? Did it start at midnight? Did it start 9 p.m. the previous night? Is it unique? Are they total? There's a lot of nuance. So to me, it's really important that you have a single source of truth and define your business terms and your business metrics in the same way, and that you apply that consistently across all of your consumption styles. So whether you're using Excel, Click, Tableau, it doesn't matter. But you got to take the model out of the consumption layer and have that be standalone. And to me, if you can do that and your data's clean, it's got to be clean, and that's really important. And data quality is really important. But data quality also means semantic quality. You got to be speaking the same language. And so that's sort of my twisted semantic view of data quality.
Well, I can relate to that, and I'll bet Stacy can too, because, CFOs, one of our big issues is getting financial statements that are believable and right. They got to be on time, they have to be accurate, they have to have a lot of credibility. And if you don't have that, then nobody cares, and the whole CFO suite kind of becomes less valuable. And so I think we're realizing that in the CFO suite now, that the data analytics has that same kind of purpose that our financial statements do. And that it had a lot of credibility. You build credibility by having things right, on time, and people trust you. And so I think that's where this marriage between the chief financial officers and data is really becoming tight, because we understand the value of those data analytics. So I really appreciate all the things you guys have said that really highlight many of the things and we've tried to express it through financial statements. Well, your groups could express it through a million other ways, through customers, through all kinds of experiences, through employees. So it's really a fun area of expansion on what the CFOs would say, we started, baby.
Well, there is a challenge of the siloed enterprise. And I don't know that, Dave, you were at Yahoo, but I consulted there for a few years, the search project for Saturn. And
I remember Saturn.
Yeah. So all I know was, guys would say, we're not responsible for quality. It's the guy who supplied the data, right? Or they would make transformations in flight. And so you could end up having a bad data source that persisted during the entire life cycle. It was not my problem, it's somebody else's problem, kind of a mentality, which I think has to change as well.
Yeah, it's that last mile. Look, something could go wrong all along the way. And it's like a game of telephone, right? It's like you copy, you enhance, you relabel, you remodel, and all of a sudden it doesn't look anything like where it began.
Oh, that's great. Some big challenges in data analytics to overcome for sure. This question, almost our last question, is for Sanjeev, Thiago, and Stacy. What is the one key message or takeaway you would, or advice you have for our audience to managing data and analytics and providing business impact, or to provide business impact? Can I read that one more time? Are you guys okay with it?
Aye.
Okay, good.
So in my opinion, the way we have been building data and analytics systems is not going to work in future. It's data teams have been very siloed. They're getting overwhelmed because there's an understanding in the business that there's a lot of value that can be unlocked from this data. So there are more use cases, more data sources, more users. So we have to rethink how we build our data applications. And that rethinking is adopting a product management approach rather than project management. So one of the things that we were just talking about was like, there's an ML model which hasn't been trained. Why is it even sitting there? Why? Because that team which built it got disbanded and they scurried on to the next project. But if you take the product management approach, it has a life cycle and a product needs to be retired. It doesn't just sit there. If it sits there, then you are opening the business to a very risky situation because anyone can use it. So that's why you've got, 10 different databases, 20 different machine learning models. How do you know which is the right one? So that's the rethink which is needed.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Thiago?
I think there's not a lot to add there other than I think the way that I think the teams are going to evolve and a lot of the architectures are going to evolve is going to change dramatically based on the access to information that you didn't have before. So back to ChatGPT, because I like that topic very much. Google is now training their chat engine or their large language model using the ChatGPT API. So back to, data quality, you're having, systems being trained on bad data and in different types of data. And then going back to something like taking on a product approach, products are really hard to build. And they don't only require a data team, they also require a software team. So in general, it has to become easier for us to gain access to data and to use data and leverage data in all the different ways that it needs to be leveraged in order for teams to create that space so that they can actually create something valuable as an output for the business. Otherwise, they're just really, they're essentially doing the work that eventually machines will do, and they're going to get put out of a job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. Good point. Stacy?
Yes, and I think it ties nicely to the comments earlier on the semantic layer and the trust and credibility in that as we cascade information to more and more people in real time through various distribution means, that has to be from the single source of truth, and that credibility and trust is paramount. But as it relates to an area that I think is key is back to the data is king, cash is queen concept, which is really on top of the traditional cash forecasting, traditional long-range cash forecasting. The 13-week cash flow is really here to stay from a finance and analytics standpoint, and that has to be quicker, and accuracy is incredibly important. And as we look at those that have been through liquidity crises, having that value chain, up the value chain to predictive and prescriptive, so you have an early warning sign should there be a liquidity challenge coming or looming, and what is the prescriptive portion of that is what should you do about that. So early warning to get to the predictive and prescriptive outcomes, I think is a tremendous value add. So my number one takeaway is when you really look at this integrated business planning concept that's paramount here is what does that mean for your cash conversion cycle?
Great summary. From a financial perspective, I love that. I wish I'd recorded it. I wasn't quick enough writing it down. Sanjeev brought up a point, and this idea of product versus project management. Yeah, so let me put you guys on the spot a bit. When you're dealing with customers and you're putting in a system for them or, doing a marketing campaign, are you looking at it as a product or it's a terrible question because who would say no? But is there in the industry in general, is it product driven or project driven?
If you ask me, it's like the future is actually product driven, as Sanjeev mentioned. So you can start to hear new terms like DevOps is about how you build software. And now they're talking about data ops because what I'm seeing is like the way that you deal with data is the same sort of techniques we use to build software. We're now applying to building data products. And what do you do with software? You have a product manager, and you have specs, and you have delivery cycles, and you check in the code, and you have code reviews, and you have pull requests. So that's, I think, happening now with data. And I predict that as we go forward, it's not going to be sort of the ad hoc, willy-nilly, let's throw some data out there and do it as a one-off. It's going to be data as a product will be treated as a program, not as a project.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. No, that's a good mindset.
I have an opinion on this that I want to share, but I agree with everything that was said. I just want to add that back to the cash versus data. I think like the liquidity of cash is very evident, but the liquidity of data is not very evident. And if you put a product team behind it and you want to monetize data in any sort of way, and you're looking at it from a product perspective, one thing that products need to do is to be profitable. So it becomes really difficult. So if you could, if these two things converge and you can eventually transform data easily into cash by monetizing it, by leveraging it, I think then it will become more obvious on how to treat some of these things as products.
Just to add to what you said, when you think about what you do when you start a software project, right, or you build a new feature, usually there's some ROI that goes into it, right? It's like, well, which customers are asking for this, and what is going to be the return on this investment? We don't do that with data today. It's just whoever screams loudest, and that's not really a really good way of running the business. Is just that whoever screams loudest gets the resources. So I think if we apply this, we can get to a more rational way of making investments using data.
Let me, I'll throw out a question for anyone that has to do with the commercialization of data. And, is it the data scientists versus the commercial managers in the business? What's that right equation to make that work? Because so many data projects do fail, right? I mean, they get to a point where everyone's all excited about an issue, we're going to get this and this out of it, and then when they kind of fall off the table eventually, and making successful data projects and really insightful analytics can be really hard work. Does anybody have an opinion on how the commercial and the data science teams, how they work together best? And if nobody does, that's okay. We'll go on to the next question.
I feel like I'm talking too much, but I have to say something on this one too. So we have a webinar series, and I always ask data leaders, so what's your ROI? How do you determine ROI of your investments? And there's a lot of really bad answers, honestly. But the one good answer I got was that as you make that investment, the measurement of the benefit goes into the design of that investment, of that data product, so that so you decide before you make any investment in building a new data product or investing in building a new analytic, you already determine how you're going to measure its value to the business. And it really forces you to sort of like, okay, well, how am I going to measure it? And if I can't measure it, it's probably a red flag. So I think that discipline, it's the best answer I've heard. Is like, if you're going to calculate ROI, you need to know what you're going to measure to calculate that ROI before you start to make the investment.
You are a CFO's dream.
I love
You
CFOs.
are a CFO
They're my
dream.
favorite customers because it's black and white. It's like I love it. I love CFOs.
That's great. Good. Well, here's what I'll do. We have plenty of time, but I'll ask one last question, and then we'll see if anybody in the audience wants to ask any questions. But this question, 5 of the 6 of you were prepped for this. 1 of you was not, so I apologize for that. But if you could describe the future of data and analytics in regards to business in 1 word, what would it be? And maybe call it the impact of data and analytics on business in the future in 1 word, what would it be?
I would call it the pulse of a business.
The pulse? The pulse.
Sure. I get to go second. Nice. Yeah.
Oh, you can pass.
No,
Mike,
I'll go
come-
second. That's fine. It's everything. I'll say it's everything.
Everything, okay.
I'll say value.
Value,
I would say equity.
equity.
My answer is transformational.
Okay.
Okay, the drum roll, drum roll.
My answer is money. It's cash, baby.
Money,
Data is money.
money, equity, good. And I'll just add my thought to that. The future, I think it's the future. I get told some of you that you could say that. For right now, I'll turn it over. If there's any questions, is that okay, Prashanth? If anybody has any questions? Yeah, thanks, Prashanth.
Hi, Mei-Lin Fang, the chair of the People-Centered Internet. This whole issue of monetization, ROI, are you guys concerned about human dignity and issues of privacy and governance? And what attention should you pay to that as those ROI arguments start to, I mean, you want to save your product, you want to do it, and then, oh, you could monetize people's data in a way that perhaps they mightn't like.
I got a perspective just on that, and that our default sort of behavior right now with data is that we're protective of it, right? And we're protective of it because we can't secure it. And so what that means is that it's not it's in terms of people consuming data to make decisions, it's really sort of it's the exception that you get access to data because we're so afraid of, it's not secure. If we had the right data governance in place, where we could trust, it comes back down to trust, that people can only get access to data that they're supposed to get access to, then we'd have a lot more data available for analysis. So I don't know if it answers your question, but I think the default is that we're so afraid of violating privacy, and then the repercussions to the business if we do that, that we do this around our data, and we do that, and when we do that, it doesn't help because it's just as insecure because we haven't solved the problem, which is making sure that in the very beginning that data is secure and you have a governance, active governance, not just policies, but technology to make sure that the data doesn't get seen by people who aren't supposed to see it.
Anybody else prepared? That was a great question, by the way. Great question.
Yeah, I think one opinion I'll add to is I think the future of how data is going to be managed is going to look a little different because we're still at a point of innovation, right? So when people are starting to fly airplanes, there's lots of people, flying things that just flew a little bit and then fell down. And, then we get the organisms around it to, not allow anybody to just build an airplane and not allow anyone to just be a pilot. And I think we're at that point with data today. And I think AI is kind of the beginning of it. Like so much information is stored inside of machine learning models. And there's a big debate around art as well, like artists that create art and that art's trained into a model that then paints like the artist, right? So then you lose the authorship or the creativity or the ownership of that art. So I think we're at a point now where things are going to start to become more regulated, but we're still passing that period of innovation where we're still starting to fly and, starting to take off and things will change. I think that was the initial intention around Web3, but that didn't go anywhere because the financial crisis and the money dried up in VC, so a lot of that changed in recent times. But I think that's where we'll see happen is centralization of personal information, access controls around personal information, so I can give access to my personal information and not any company is going to store it. and so on and so forth.
And, everybody wants that, right? So the consumer wants that, but also the business wants that too, because if it is secure, they have more confidence to actually to be able to deploy that in ways that benefit the customer.
All the data that's collected is fed into machine learning algorithms, and there could be biases that are built in, the lack of adequate dimensions that are put in there, that could affect people's lives in the future. And I think what this calls for is, I think Dave was talking about as well, is more governance and better protection. And I think we're just beginning to crawl in the space. So, and you're absolutely right. You could destroy somebody's reputation if bad information is collected and allowed to permeate. And so, and I've been looking at connected devices, and somebody said, let's just take the case of connected cars. What if your car can order something from a department store? It orders ammonium nitrate and diesel. Somebody's hacked it, right? And then you got the FBI or somebody knocking on your door ready to arrest. So protecting it as it flows through the system and making sure that even decisions that are made, judgments that are made, you don't get to own stuff which is not protected. They can't just say your car ordered it, therefore you're culpable for this. So, and I think there's a long way to go, but it's a good future. We're going in the right direction.
Good, go ahead.
Okay, I was going to drill down on her question a little bit, but I think we sort of got there, right? There's a broader economic, social value that we have to think about, and unintended consequences of models like in the streaming, music streaming. Music is all the same because they built the models for money, so there's very little diversity. But I'll change directions here. So I'm going to hone in on finance, right? So thinking about cash flow, cash conversion cycle, and we're throwing out all this technology. So what do you think about FinOps? Because to me, it has a very similar aspect of procurement. I mean, it's really a procurement use case, right? It's just different things that you're procuring. So curious about your thoughts on FinOps.
Sure, thank you. I believe this is emerging as far as, to me, it comes down to the concepts that were introduced about, is data becoming an intangible, the liability versus asset point of view. And it really ties to the discussion around, is it a product management versus a project manager? And so all of these things are coming together to where it is becoming an asset that does have an ROI, which also has monetization opportunities. So it's all that business cycle, which comes back to cash conversion to me. So I think the emergence of the governance on the foundation is foundational to this, though, right? It can't be exploitative. So as that, all of the model aspects from top to bottom sort of go in a circular reference and lead to this transformational change, which is making that into an asset and a product.
I love the topic of FinOps, so it's so good. One of the things that a customer of ours taught me about FinOps is just as being able to allocate or track consumption. So in Snowflake, you have the ability to create different virtual warehouses and then assign those to different teams. And so what he did is that he did just that. So, and he was able to assign different warehouse sizes to different groups, and then he could track that. And so you could actually charge back, based on that expense of that overall Snowflake cloud expense back to the individual business unit. And when finance has to close the books and it's at the end of the month, give them a large. When they don't, if it's not the end of the month, give them a small. So having the tools to actually track and track spend and then consumption allows a whole set of really good things that can happen. You can tune your cloud usage, which is key, right? Because now the cloud is an unlimited capacity thing, and everybody will use it in an unlimited fashion if you let them. But if you can actually track it, then you can tune for consumption based on need. And then you can also, if you can consume and based on need, you can also decide to make trade-offs. It's like, well, do you need a large warehouse, or can you deal with a small warehouse and pay it an extra couple seconds per query? So, oh, you need a large? Okay, well, that's going to cost, for those extra 2 seconds, that's going to cost an extra $10,000 a month. Is it really worth $10,000 a month for 2 seconds of improvement in query time? It starts to let you make those trade-offs, which I think is interesting.
These guys are so smart. I mean, they are way up here. In a more practical sense for me, as long as finance is on an order to cash, procure to pay, and we have these different segments, we're missing the point that these two are talking about, right? We're trying to take a microcosm of what we're doing and make that better, where it's actually got to be a bigger ecosystem that we're driving to get to where you're suggesting. And FinOps is so important from an efficiency standpoint. And all that starts with the customer, and all that ends up being the privacy issues you're talking about. So we can improve a lot of things in those other sections, but until you know what demand is and can fulfill that, you're going to run into those privacy issues that are really going to be a great challenge, but also an opportunity for a lot of companies. So.
Steve, just on that point, the best in that part, that was a partnership. So while our customer was in IT, he was in data, he partnered with the CFO, and those reports, everything was managed at the CFO's office level. And that's how they managed their spend. And that ended up saving the company a ton of money and just providing visibility into the CFO's office so that you can decide, like, hey, okay, now we can actually calculate an ROI on that Snowflake spend.
That's great. Good.
Yeah, this is Vinay. I just found the discussion around data versus cash being king or queen. I would like to propose that we humans actually become the kings and queens, and data and cash are tools at our disposal to shape the future. So just some food for thought.
I'm not going to argue with that one. I don't know if anybody else wants to argue that.
I just want to say we should stop this discussion, focus on the business problems. All of this is just noise. King, queen, co-jester. And this is the whole problem we have in the IT space, where business stops listening to us because we just spin our wheels, big data, no SQL, on and on and on. And, it just distracts us from the problem. Just my 2 cents.
Sanjeev, thank you for that. And I'm getting the time.
We have time for 2 questions. We have one from Ryan and one from Gary.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I'll be quick. Well, first I have a comment. Is it okay to argue with one of the panelists? Dave?
Argue, please.
The ROI issue. I'm coming from the CFO, finance and accounting space. In the middle of my career, I did a lot of activity-based costing, which is a far superior method. People would always say, is it worth it? What's the ROI on ABC, activity-based costing? I'd say, tell me what the ROI is on your general ledger. Kind of like something that's, somewhat primitive. It's hard to measure. Sometimes you have to go with faith and intuition and say, this is just a better way. Okay, I do have a question which may be a little serious. I've been involved with software vendor MindBridge and Blue Prism on robotic process automation impact on the accounting community. Accounts payable clerk, gone. Computer replace it. Payroll clerk, gone. They audit, and think of the CPA firms, done by a computer, 100%, no sampling. Jobs are going to be eliminated. So what's your impressions about what do people that are in the accounting field and even analysts, USA Today, I don't know, baseball games in USA is actually being done by natural process language. It knows, they have all the data about every bat, every hit, every run. The newspaper will actually run the article, and then the typical journalist becomes a copy editor. Well, that'll happen. My career, I was a financial analyst at a large Fortune 100 company. We used to do the division reports for all the divisions. We get the P&L and everything. A computer can now replace the analyst job. So the impact on jobs, that's my question.
Can I just say, the question that you asked is a question that we've been asking for 100 years. every few years, we just repeat the same thing. ATM machines are coming in. Now, this happened before me. What happens to all those tellers who are dispensing cash? Did JP Morgan retrench? No, they've hired thousands time more people than they had in 1950s, 60s, or whenever the ATMs came out. Walt Disney did all the designs, and he had like all these designers. Now we use Adobe Acrobat and all these designer tools. What happened to those jobs? This is a hot topic these days because of ChatGPT. Because ChatGPT can write your entire SQL code, build your entire website. What happens to all the HTML developers? So we've again gotten into this cycle. I don't think we need to worry about these things. Those jobs will move up the chain, just like teller jobs moved up into maybe relationship manager or private client banker or whatever it may be. So I think this is just a natural progression.
Sanjeev, I'm glad you said it, not me, because that's always going to be the same answer. It is that we are always worried about being replaced. And I think that we really undervalue the human brain and how complex and wonderful like what we have is. And, to me, they're always, the advancements are tools to make us more efficient. And yeah, sometimes it makes us more efficient so we don't have to do that job anymore at all. But I was at the Gartner conference, 2 weeks ago. And I sat in on the Microsoft session where they showed ChatGPT integration, OpenAI integration with Microsoft Office. And I was blown away because, of course, in Word, you could have, GPT like write something. But in Excel, they basically said, can you make me a chart on this data? And it came up and it would do a chart on that data. And it did a chart that, probably would have taken me, probably 15, 20 minutes to do. Did it replace me? I don't think so. I think it made me better. And so it allowed me to spend more time on other stuff that I think is maybe higher valued. That's always, that's the economist in me because I'm an econ major. But that typically tends to be every few years, as Sanjeev says, there's always that fear. I don't think anything is different here.
That's a great question to give us to talk over coffee too, right? When we're done, because I think that is there a responsibility for management or not in that area? And I think that's a tough question. So one more question, and then
I don't want to keep anybody.
Prashanth's going to kick me off.
My question in the beginning of the panel, you had talked about some of the cases where data quality, if it's poor, basically dooms a data initiative. And it made me think, well, with all the companies that I've worked with, who is responsible for the quality of data? It's the person who's also the data architect. They're in charge of data integrations. They're also the person doing the dashboard. There's too many roles for them to be good at data quality. Are we going to start to see positions of people that are just there to make sure the data is correct and accessible and valuable? Are we going to be creating jobs of data quality assurance people?
I'll let somebody.
Yeah, I would like to take that. I think, I don't think anyone wants to be looking at, a table with 1 million records and figuring out which values are not supposed to be there, which values are good or bad. I think that's where I think we get augmented by AI and systems that are designed to improve the quality of data for us. I don't think the human brain can actually hold all the relationships that are in a database. So it becomes much easier to have an AI system hold that information and that state. So I think over time, everybody gets better at doing their job if they can rely on something else that can check for them. Like I couldn't write without a spell checker today. Like even though, I can write perfectly, I just don't want to have to write without a spell checker. And I think that's what we're going to see in the case of data quality, in the case of some of these tasks. And potentially even in the case of architectures, I think, architects that are coming up with a new system or new architecture and they don't have all the questions to the problems they're trying to solve, I think that could be helped by AI systems as well, or other systems that can help you design a better data. But ultimately, the human is at fault today for creating bad data. So if somebody enters bad data in a form and that ends up in your report, that's the fault of the human. So hopefully that would be solved by systems that can better assist us at creating high quality data from the beginning.
Thank you, Thiago, and thank this really brilliant panel. These people are changing the way business is done. And with that, Prashanth, I think, is going to say a few words. I will say one thing about Prashanth, though, because he taught me that data analytics means nothing if you don't ask the right question. So with that, I'll let you start off with data quality in your book.
Luke. Matt, can you call Luke? Okay. I don't see my slides coming up here. Okay, so thank you everybody for coming to the session again. So I just want to say a few, take a few minutes and talk about my book, why I wrote it and what is it about and all those things. But whenever I talk about data quality, there is a perception in the industry that, okay, this is really techie. Then the nerds are talking about data quality and all those things. So I want to make it a little bit fun and do something where you can take away some important things so that when you go back to work tomorrow, you look a little bit smarter. Of course, you're already smart with hearing all their perspectives from the 6+1 business leaders, but I just want to share some of my perspectives about data quality in a little bit of a fun and but different way. Again, thank you very much. And we start with what data is all about, and we'll talk about what data quality actually means. How do we define data quality? I think Ramesh was talking about data quality as being very subjective. How you define data quality now will not be the one which you'll be defining later. So we'll talk about data quality as well. Then I'll talk about 3 important myths about data quality. You might be a little bit surprised about what are these myths, and I'll talk about that. And what is the reality, myths versus reality? I will talk about that. And then lastly, what you can do to improve data quality in your organizations. So this is the agenda which we have. So before I go to the first topic, which is on data and data quality, can anybody tell me, when you talk about data, give me one example of data that comes to your mind. What is that one data object which you think when somebody says about data? Cost center. Okay, next. Dan said it's about cost center. What else?
Social security number.
Okay, social security number. What else? Census data. Anything else? Credit card data. So let's be a little bit specific. Let's talk in the enterprise world, in the business world. So what data objects come to your mind when we talk about data in the business world? Clickstream. Okay, let's talk specific about objects still within the business world. What else? Customer. Okay, that's products, customer, products. What else? Time. SKUs, products. Okay. So we got a lot of examples about what data is all about in the business world. So when we talk about data, it's actually a set of attributes which we are talking about. Let's take a simple example of a purchase order. When we talk about purchase order, we are not talking about a single attribute within the purchase order. We are talking about a bunch of attributes which make up the data. And each of those attributes within that purchase order object has got 3 key characteristics. Number 1, of course, the attributes which we are talking about. Number 2, the values within those attributes, and the format in which those attributes are being represented. For example, quantity The unit of measure or the value there is integer. But on the other hand, if you look at item description, it's a text. So every attribute within that data object has got a value which is there in a specific format. So we all spoke about different types of data objects. But overall, when we talk about data in a business world, in my experience, I talk about 4 key data objects that really matter. So what are these? We'll talk about it, but unfortunately, you'll be surprised that many companies are not talking about majority of the objects which we are discussing today. So if you look at the business world, there are 4 key data objects that are really in scope. Oh my gosh, what is this, Prashanth? First party, second party, what are you talking about? We never heard about this data. We have been hearing about what Dan is talking about, customers, what Steve is talking about, orders, invoices, remittances, so on and so forth. So what is it you're talking about here? First, let's look at the first-party data. First-party data is all the data that has been created internally by the company, like your orders, most of the things which you have just mentioned. This data has got very high business impact because most of the data that has been created, especially the transactional elements that have been created, goes and hits the GL. So it's all under your scope, but the good thing is it has high impact, high business impact, because it impacts how your financial statements, bottom line, and all those things. Then let's look at the second party data. Oh, before we go there, let's look at zero party. What is that zero party data? The zero party data is all the data which you have, which is about your potential partners or counterparties. I'll give a simple story. Last year, I saw a Facebook post from Calgary Petroleum Club. Calgary is where I live. And one of the posts was about their opening new members or enrollment for new members. So I just put a Facebook comment, are you taking members now? Immediately within 10 minutes, I get a call from Calgary Petroleum Club. Hey, Prashanth, we saw your Facebook post. Yes, we are taking new members now. Are you ready to meet? So I said, I'm traveling now. I'll come back and talk to you later. So when do you want us to call? I said, call after 3 weeks. So this data, which Calgary Petroleum Club has about Prashanth, is the zero-party data. I'm not their customers. I'm not doing any business with them. But still, they have this information about me where I could become their potential customer or ultimately their customer. This is the zero-party data. Most of the work, for example, what Matt is doing, who is the head of marketing in Toric, is the data he's managing about the potential customers who are his prospects. They are not real customers of Toric, but the data which Matt is working on is all about zero-party data, hoping that at some point in time, these prospects will become his customers, or it could be even vendors. An oil company is talking about a counterparty, and this entity can become their vendors or EPC companies at some point in time. The second party data, which unfortunately is not being used very effectively in the companies. What is this? This is the data which your counterparties have about you. Let's take an oil and gas company. Most of the work which happens on the in the oil fields, for example, by the drilling companies, is the work done by companies like Schlumberger, for example, for, say, Chevron. The data Schlumberger has about the oil field, about Chevron, is actually Chevron's data. But this data is actually managed by Schlumberger, which is a second-party data. When you want to get a mortgage, for example, you call the mortgage agent, and mortgage agent looks at a bunch of different financial providers and gets you the best mortgage. So this data there, which the mortgage agents have, is the data about all the banks or the financial institutions. This is second-party data. Basically, the second-party data is about your data, which is managed by somebody else. The good thing is that there's a lot of data here, but the bad thing is that integration or data integration becomes a huge challenge because most of the data is in those companies. The last one is the third-party data, which is the data which you can usually buy. For example, Matt wants to know, okay, I want to know all the decision makers who are in these construction companies, and where do I get this information? He goes to Zoom Info and he buys this for a price. This data which Matt has got is the third-party data. But at the same time, Matt's competitors might also get this. There is nothing that this data has been created for Matt or anybody else. So third-party data, whether it could be the Zoom data or weather data, so on and so forth, is the data that can be procured very easily. So when we talk about the data which the companies are working on, sadly or unfortunately, majority of the data the companies are concerned about when it comes to data quality is fill in the blank. What is that? First-party data, absolutely. Actually, 60 to 70% of the data that's part of the company's forte is in zero-party data, second-party, or even third-party data. We'll talk about third-party data as well soon, but that's a sad reality. So when you talk about data quality, most of them are talking about the first-party data, but there's a lot of data that companies are ignoring, which is affecting their analytics, AI, and all those other initiatives. So what's data quality? So I said data quality is the data which is used for business operations. What does this mean, Prashanth? Basically, three things. Number one, the data used for operations. Number two, compliance. And third one, for decision making. I've always seen that the origination of data is typically for operations and compliance. Rarely, companies capture data for analytics. Analytics is a byproduct of the operations and compliance activities which happens. I'm not saying that companies are not capturing data for analytics. That rarely happens. It is operations and compliance which is driving those initiatives. Let me give you a simple example. I was born and raised in India. And a few years back, or a few decades back, the banks had the governments had huge problems on money laundering, terrorism, and all those issues. They started this process called KYC in the banks, know your customer. How did it start? KYC started because of regulations. The government introduces regulations so that you can capture the customer details for all the banking operations that are happening. But today, the banks are using the same KYC data to send products. So you must have seen a bunch of products which are, do you want this credit card, or do you want this mortgage, so on and so forth. This is all originating from the KYC data. So generally, if you see, majority of the use cases for analytics, the origination of data typically happens from operations and compliance, and rarely it happens for analytics. So overall, when we talk about data quality, these are the three major areas which we are talking about: operations, compliance, and analytics. So let's go further on data quality. So I talk about 12 key dimensions of data quality. In the interest of time, I don't want to go over all 12 dimensions, but I'll talk about two things, which is accuracy and correctness. So a few years back, I was working for a telecom company, which is Canada's biggest telecom company. And as I was hired by a contractor by this company, and there was a Big Four consulting company which was also working on improving the customer 360, or the data quality of the customers. So this company, or the analyst, came to us and said, oh, we have very bad customer data. What do you mean bad? 99.7% of the customer data is of poor quality. Oh my gosh, we are Canada's biggest telecom company, and how is it 99.7% of the customer data is bad? How are we doing business? So what do you mean by data quality? What are you talking about? They said the address is wrong. So what? We are not able to send invoices to those customers. So it's affecting your bottom line. Okay, so what do you mean the address is wrong? You're not able to send invoices, but 95% of them have signed for email invoices, which happens to the majority of our cases. Rarely we get a telephone bill in a paper format now. So the real issue is not 99.7%, it is 4.7. But still, this 4.7 is also a big. So let's talk more about it. Let's talk about this 4.7% issues which you have on data quality. So when we look at the 4.7, the issues were all related to accuracy. What does this mean? Street is called ST, drive is called DR, court is called CT. Technically, these are all wrong. But a postman knows that a court is called CT, street is called ST. So it's not a big issue. The big issue is about the zip code or the PIN code. So let's talk about this. So we had a separate API that did this validation, and we found that the real issues were basically about 0.003% of the cases. So within a matter of 30 minutes, the discussion came from 99.7% data quality to 0.003% data quality. That means you need to understand the dimensions better. Accuracy is a degree of correctness. Address can be accurate, but telephone number needs to be correct. Even a one-digit issue with the telephone number makes the data quality pretty much useless. Whereas if you call a street an ST, it's not a big deal. Of course, many people forget the H in my name when you talk Prashanth, but it's not a big deal. But if they miss my phone number, if Calgary Petroleum Club misses my phone number, then they'll be reaching a wrong Prashanth. Okay. So with this, let's talk about the three purposes of data which we have: operations, compliance, and analytics. Well, Prashanth, what is this line in between? What does this blue line mean? So as I said earlier, the origination of data typically happens for operations and compliance, and rarely it happens for analytics. So I'll ask a question to all of you. let's take the Starbucks here in this corner. Do you think Starbucks is doing analytics based on the products that have been sold, all the coffee they're selling? Yes or no? If head of analytics in Starbucks wants to know how many lattes of medium size have been sold in, say, San Francisco, will they be able to get this information? Yes or no? Everybody says yes. Now there is one more. You know, Steve said about analytics is all about questions. True. Now the next question they have. Do people in San Francisco drink more coffee than people in Boston? Can they get this information from their database, from all their operations activities? Yes or no? Maybe, but generally, do they get this information by location? Sales by location, yes or no? Okay, good. Third question. The more tougher questions you ask in analytics, the more interesting things become. Third question they have. Is weather an important factor in coffee selling? Yeah, Manu says yes. Weather is an important factor. Okay, you have a great question here. Do you think Starbucks, when you go and buy a coffee from Starbucks, when you get the receipt, you see what product you bought, where you bought the Starbucks coffee. Do you think Starbucks is capturing the weather data of what's happening? Rarely. The answer is mostly no. So at some point in time, depending on the questions which you're asking, your data will basically give up. So this is not a hypothetical story which I'm making. This is a real story which we had. This story was basically from one of Canada's biggest fuel retailing company, where the hypothesis was, does weather play a role in car wash? So they said when it snows a particular day and the next day is very sunny, the hypothesis is that people come for car washes in Canada. So let's give a notification to their app and say that, hey, when you come here, you get a $1 off on your coupons. That's where we use data analytics for better monetization, or in Stacy's word, better cash conversion cycle. So if you look at on the left side, it's defined and predictable. If I want to create a purchase order, whether you're working for Chevron or whether you're working for Walmart, the purchase order data model is defined and predictable. The data is often native and proprietary. SAP, Oracle, Salesforce, they're pretty much, the data model is pretty much the same. And the focus is on business processes. But on the other hand, if you go to analytics, it's about hypothesis-based. It's all about asking questions. I always tell my clients, at some point in time, the data will give up. It all depends on the degree of questions which you're asking. Tioga was talking a lot about ChatGPT. So my hypothesis or my stand at this point in time is all about asking questions. The asking questions is the one that's going to differentiate how you use ChatGPT. If you're able to ask great questions, you are able to use this tool very well. Or else it's not going to be a great friend of yours. The data might be there, the data might not be there when you talk about analytics. You have the data by location, you have the data by product, but whether you don't have the data. So you have to probably buy it from a third-party system and integrate it with your first-party data to make it happen. It's always on the structured format. What is required in analytics is structured data. Majority of the data we are capturing today in business is unstructured. I call it as TAVI data, text, audio, video, and images. But what businesses need is structured data. So what, Prashanth? What does this mean? What is the impact of structured data? Let's take a simple thing about regression or linear regression. Depending on the questions which you are asking, the model is selected. If my question is, how much money we are going to make in 2024, you are going to select linear regression because the data type is numerical. But on the other hand, if your question changes to, are we making a profit in 2024, the answer to that becomes categorical. So you might use logistic regression. So the data type is going to define what more data science models you are going to pick. So the data has to be in the structured format that's required for analytics. Whereas in operations and compliance, even if the data is in a text format, that's okay. So I have done an inspection for my pump. I take a picture of all the reports which have been done so that when the regulators come, I can show this, store this image. That's good. But for analytics, that image has got very little value. You need to bring it to the right structure so that you can answer the right queries. And the focus is on insights, unlike in operations and compliance, it's all about processes. So I said many times, which is all about asking questions. For what? For two major things. One is to measure performance. Next, number two is decision making. Today, or after a few days, you go for your medical checkup. So you see that, okay, all my data is good, but my cholesterol levels are bit up. So you have a choice here, either to take that data or just throw it, or else I say, oh, my cholesterol levels are bit up, let me work on it. Let me do some exercise. Let me sleep well. Let me do some meditation and stop eating pizzas, a lot of pizzas. Let me do some good food and all those things. But if you don't believe in the concepts of performance and measurement, then this health report which you have is practically useless. So the first thing I tell my clients is belief in measurement is the fundamental thing about data analytics. It's not about cloud, it's not about Python, it's not about regression. It's about believing that measurement is important to make the right decision is what drives analytics. I've written a couple of articles on this, why this industry should look more at oil and about data analytics, the data culture, and so on and so forth. So you can go to Google about me and you can read those articles. So we spoke about, or you saw a slide a few minutes back about data quality degrades every per month by 2 to 7%. Why does it degrade? So in my book on the data quality, which you'll all get when you leave, I've written about 16 main reasons why data quality degrades. So I'll talk about 6 reasons in the interest of time. The first one is manual errors. I think somebody in the panel discussion was also talking. Was it Dave? Was it you who mentioned about manual data entry? So manual data entry. That's one of the biggest reasons why we have poor data quality. And one of the reasons being lack of data literacy. Number 2, organization silos. So we have organization silos, which is good in a way because it builds agility, it builds speed, but on the other hand, it creates a lot of silos within the organizations. A few years back, I was working as an enterprise architect for an oil company. So I was supposed to bring everybody together, accounting, finance, procurement, IT, legal, and all those things. So there were about 20 people in the room, and everybody was talking about, oh, we need to do this, and all those things. I'll not name the company, but I said, I was so upset at that time. I told, we have representation from HR, procurement, legal, every department in the company. And the name of the company was ABC. But unfortunately, we don't have representation from ABC. I was so emotional, I made that statement. When I made that, there's a pin drop silence in the room. So I thought that I lost my job. But actually, that built a lot of credibility. They knew that, oh, this guy is talking about the interest of the company rather than playing games with one department versus the other. So organization silos exist in almost every company. You have to live with this. So that's another reason why data quality degrades. The third one is different ways things are interpreted and consumed. Let's take payment terms. Stacy, what's your take on payment term? Do you see a payment term, net 30, net 60, net 90, as a risk or as a way to serve your vendors? What do you think? Okay, so you slightly deflected my question. But generally, if you look at payment terms, most of the finance people look at payment terms as a risk. Say, for example, if you take a vendor who has been paid 30 days versus a vendor who says that you can pay me after 60 days, they say this vendor is my friend because I can improve my cash conversion cycle because he's been paid a bit late. But if you talk to procurement would be a little bit upset with that because they fear that, oh, 90 days, this guy might not give me the best service. So procurement and finance might have different views when you talk about a payment term, which is a data object. Net 30, finance is happy. Net 60, procurement is happy. The same with sales versus finance. Inventory. Sales wants more inventory generally, so that when the customer makes an order, they can serve the customer quickly. But on the other hand, if you look at finance, they say the more inventory you carry, the more inventory carrying costs, so let's reduce the inventory. So there's always a tussle that's happening between sales versus finance. So same data object, look from different ways of interpretation and consumption. Fourth one is data integration. Whenever data moves, there is a risk because adherence to the data model changes. You take the data from SAP and you move it to the data warehouse, there is no defined data model which you have in the data warehouse. So the data issues are more common in the data warehouse compared to the transactional system like an ERP or a CRM. System upgrades, in one of the companies I worked, they use the phone code of the vendor to validate the tax area. Or this number is 403, so that means this guy is in Alberta. So that means there is no GST. Or this number is Toronto, what's the area code, Arjun? 647. Oh, this area code is 647. This is Toronto. So there is GST plus provincial sales tax. So based on that area, first three digits of the telephone number of the vendor, all the calculations about taxes were happening. But when the system got upgraded, this was all custom code. That code was just gone. So you need to, again, one more issues which you have on data quality. And last one, especially on bespoke applications, we have poor database design. All the third normal forms and all those things are not taken care. So that leads to, and one more reason for data quality. So I've written, I've found 16 main reasons why data quality issues happen. So in the interest of time, I just spoke about 6. So when you get my book, you can read those 16 reasons. Another reason of getting that book is if you have a hard time sleeping, you can read my book as well. Okay, so let's talk about the 3 myths which I discuss. Okay, 3 myths, especially in analytics and AI. Data is a business asset. Oh my gosh, what is this, Prashanth? What are you talking? We thought this whole presentation is going to be about data is oil, data is blood, data is oxygen, and all those things. You say it's a myth? Oh my gosh, I never thought that I would be coming and wasting my time here. We'll talk about that. And 100% data quality is required for analytics. That's the second thing. Many people think that there is a unicorn called 100% data quality. In my view, that's a myth. And the last one, the value of data, it remains constant. Once you capture the data, it remains constant. That's a third myth which I commonly see in my projects. So a couple of blogs which I've written, one for seller data. We have Greg here from seller data about real-time analytics. And then with CFO.University, I wrote about why data is missing from the data balance sheet related to these 3 myths. So the first one is data is a business asset. Yes, it's true. Data is oil, blood, oxygen, and everything, provided it's managed well. But if you don't know how to manage it well, it becomes a huge liability, which is very hard to get rid of. I tell my clients, be a little bit paranoid here. Look in from the other side. Treat data as a liability, and then what you can do to make it an asset. So I spoke about this data as a liability in a conference, which was on the last day of the conference, and I put this data as a liability. And there was a lot of shock. We came to hear that data is an asset, and you are saying data is a liability. So why does data become a liability? 4 reasons. Today, more and more companies are capturing data at a tremendous pace. They say the amount of data that's captured in 2025 will be almost will double every 8 hours. That's the rate at which companies are capturing data. So what? So with this, there is more volume, and that more volume being more complexity, more cost. The IT expenses of most companies in the world are growing up by almost 3 to 5% every year. Despite all this cost-cutting initiatives, layoffs, cloud computing, and everything, still many companies are not able to tame their cost initiatives. And one of the reasons being increasing amount of data capture that is happening. Number 2, ESG. How many of you know the term ESG? Okay, good. Everybody knows this here. So today, most of the capital investments are based on your carbon footprint. That's one of the key metrics which we are talking about. I come from Calgary, which is an oil town. So today, every company's website you go in Calgary, we have about a page dedicated for ESG. Or because the investment that's happening in the oil patch these days, it's based on the carbon footprint. Not just in the oil patch. In every industry, we are talking about the increasing amount of carbon footprint that is happening. So if you talk about Google, we have quite a few people from Google, Vish, Vinay, and all those people who have come. So if you talk about Google, they are migrating many of the data centers to renewable energy. Why? Because again for ESG. The third one is about data security. The more data you capture, you become more attractive for hackers. So today we talk about a term called dark data. What do you think is the amount of dark data in an average company? How much of data in a company is unused? What's your guess? 90%. 80 to 90%. Forrester came up with a study which says 73%, and IBM and Carnegie Mellon, they say it's 90%. So 90% of the data that has been captured, which is in step 1, is unused data. So when you have a lot of data that is unused, the hackers don't care whether it's good data or bad data. They just come into the system and just hack it. When Equifax systems were hacked, Equifax spent $1.4 billion in fixing their IT systems. Why? They had a lot of data in their applications, and that was the origin of all this hackers coming into their systems. And lastly, data privacy. Cambridge Analytica came into limelight because of data analytics, and it was the same data analytics which resulted in the collapse. So overall, data is an asset if you know how to use it. If you think that you attended a conference and somebody told data is an oil, blood, oxygen, and all those things, you are completely wrong. If you don't know how to manage it, it's a huge liability which becomes very hard to dispose of. The second, and what's the solution? It should be tied to the purpose. 3 purposes which I discussed: operations, compliance, and analytics. Capture the data because you can directly associate with those 3 reasons. Number 2, it should be processed. Unstructured data is good for operations and compliance. But if you have to get real value or more value out of data, you have to use it for analytics. You have to use it for decision making. That's where you have to transform the data from a raw format, which is a TAVI, text, audio, video, and images, to a structured format so that you can query it better. And lastly, data should be non-substitutable, especially when it comes to decision making. We make decisions based on 2 major areas. One is based on your intuition. Number 2, based on data. If your data literacy skills is low, you rely on your intuition to make the decision. So you have to improve the level of data literacy in your organization so that people use data to complement intuition. I'm not saying that intuition is bad, but it has to be a combination of both intuition and analytics to get holistic decisions. Number 2, 100% data quality is required for analytics. So many people think that it's all about data quality should be 100%. But the thing is, it doesn't exist. Oh my gosh, what are you talking? Why it doesn't exist? Because the data itself is a recording of the past activity, and the business is always in a state of flux. Mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, new product introduction, regulations, COVID, monkeypox, all those things are forcing businesses to completely adapt to the way things are happening. And the way the data is captured is always a lag. There is a lag that's happening between an activity, between an event that has happened versus what you are looking for. So the 100% data quality, the unicorn actually doesn't exist. So accept the fact it doesn't exist so that you can look at other ways of managing data. So Prashanth, when you say 100% data quality doesn't exist, what are we looking for? Can we run business with just 10% data quality? Is it okay? The answer is no. The threshold is 40-70 rule. Don't make any decisions if you have less than 40% rule, and don't wait for a state where there is more than 70% data quality. Today, we are not talking about big data as much as we spoke about big data earlier. We are talking about right data. We are talking about data quality. It's in IEEE, all the politicians, leaders, everybody is talking about the right data these days. So the focus should be on getting good quality data and being adaptable, being flexible so that you can manage the remaining 20-30% data. And don't think that you can run business with 20% data quality. 40% is the minimum threshold. The third myth or versus reality is the data value remains constant. They say 60% of the value of the data is lost before it's actually captured. So in this thing, we talk about half-life of data. What's half-life? The time it takes for a particular element to degrade and bring its value to 50%. So every company is different. I know that. Every data is also different. But if you have to come up with one number and say, this is the half-life of data which we have, what do you think is a half-life of data in a company? What is the time it takes for a data to reduce its value by 50%? What's your guess? 3 months. Okay, good. 3 months is one number. Any other idea? Any other number? 6 months. 30 days. 30 days, okay. So Nucleus Research, they came up with this study, and I took that study and I further expanded it and made a secondary research out of it. The weighted average, I use the word weighted average, it's 8 hours. 8 hours is the time for the value of the data to reduce by 50%. So first of all, you have 60% of the value of the data is lost before it's actually captured. And then 8 hours is the time it takes for the value of the data to reduce by 50%. But today, if you talk about decision making, people are making decisions based on 2012 data, 2010 data. But on the other hand, I'm not saying that go with 8 hours. But I say anything more than 2 years is very questionable. So I did a project for a company which is in Vancouver, where Steve is based. And I spoke to the CFO at that time. It was in 2021. And he said, Prashanth, we have been in business since 2014, but don't worry about the data from 2014 till COVID. It's all useless. Our business model has changed. Our businesses have changed. Just look at the data from the last 12 months. That's what really matters. That's true in most of the companies as well, whether it's COVID or not. Making decisions today based on 2015 or 2010 data is practically useless. So 8 hours might be pretty harsh, but I think anything outside 2 years, you should really look at those insights seriously. And again, what do you do? If you look at the data lifecycle, I call it as 4 stages of data analytics: data capture, integration, data science, and decision science. There are many options which you have. You don't have to look at data quality in the initial stages of the data lifecycle. You can harness data quality during the data warehouse or semantic layer, which Dave was talking about. And different options you have to be a little bit smart and not be restricted, saying that, oh, when I capture the data, it has to be of perfect quality. You have different options to make it happen. So how do you do this? Number one, for operations and compliance, it's better to use system of record. Try to use master data management, for example, when you want to get a good quality customer data or SKUs and all those things. But when we talk about analytics, focus on the system of insights and try to bring your zero-party data, because that's where you get more insights about your customers, your products, your markets, second-party data, your counterparties, and of course the third-party data, which is about your market and the competition. Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah. Now, what's the solution? So let's quickly look at the DARS framework, which I discussed in the book, which stands for define the data quality problem. Number 2, assess the problem which you have. Third one is realize, how to implement it, and sustain. So the first one, every phase of the DARS model, I just put one slide. So it's about most of the data quality issues are visible, or some are visible, but most of them are hidden. So I call it as a 1-10-100 rule. So what is this? If you are proactive, it just takes 1x effort to fix the data quality. But if you are reactive, it takes 100 times more effort and cost to fix the data quality. So you have a choice. Either you want to be proactive or do you want to be reactive. If you want to be reactive, you'll be spending 100 times more effort or cost compared to being proactive. Analyze phase. So there's a quote which I often use in front of my clients. Don't preach religion to a hungry man. So there's no point in talking about what Google is doing or what Facebook is doing to a company which is just a $5 million in revenue. So understand where they are in their life journey, in the data life cycle, and talk about the solutions which are pertaining to them. So I talk about these 4 stages in your business processes, and use the measurements such as measures of centrality and variation to find out where they are in their data quality journey. Realize solution is about 4 things which I have, which is written in the book as well. Master data management. If you're talking about good quality customer data, products, vendors, talk to Dan. He's from Informatica, and he can talk more about MDM. So, but if that's not the solution, you can go to the next stage in the data lifecycle, do something about data integration, which could be on data wrangling, which could be on feature engineering, all the techniques which you have, especially on analytics, to manage the data in the later stages of the life cycle. Then you have the semantic layer. Okay, I have put all the data in my data warehouse. Still, I want a consistent view of what's happening, or some KPIs. Then you have the semantic layer. So don't be restricted saying, when I talk to my clients and talk about data quality, they think, oh, are you talking about MDM? Yes, MDM is part of the data quality, but there are other solutions as well. So be flexible on what you want to do and be adaptable about what you are going to implement as well. And last one is about sustaining. You might have the greatest data quality, but if you just allow the data to be there, it will degrade. It has to be controlled. It has to be governed. And when you talk about data governance, it's not about policing. It's not about bureaucracy. Data comes before data governance. I wrote one article also in CDO magazine about data governance. You can read it, but it's in my book too. So it's so with this, a quick takeaway. So look at the data flywheel. So don't restrict yourself with just first-party data, which could be a purchase order or customers. Try to expand your data footprint and look at zero-party data, second-party data, third-party data, and so on. Data quality is very contextual, which we discussed earlier. It depends on time, location, and the purpose which you have. Data is an asset, no doubt in that, but it's an asset only if you know how to use it. Just storing and capturing data doesn't make you data-driven. You need to use it. You need to use the data for your transactional activities. I was working for consulting for a transportation company in Canada, which is the biggest one in North America, in the world, by the way. And they said, Prashanth, we need your help in Customer 360. Okay, what do you mean by Customer 360? So we have 500,000 customers, and we want to improve the data quality of the 500,000 customers. Oh, this is a big number. But tell me, out of this 500,000 customers, how many customers did you do business in the last 18 months? The number was 1,700. So when we talk about data quality, there's no point in talking about the 5 million customers. So when the real business is happening with this 1,700 customers. So I said, okay, next question. How many customers did you do business in the last 5 years? 2,400. So what about the remaining 5,000 the millions of hundreds and thousands of customers you have? What happened to them? Oh, that's a separate department which is taking care of it. So when we talk about data quality, we might want to talk about this master data, which is good, 5 million. But first, the real thing when we talk about data quality is about transactions. Transactions are the ones which are like the acid test or the linchpin of enterprise performance management. They are the compliance document. A purchase order which you have with your vendor is a compliance document, not a vendor master record which you have, because you have a transaction happening with the purchase order. It's also a relationship you have with your counterparty, and it also has a twofold effect on accounting. So transactional data is the key that holds, that brings everything together. And when we talk about data management, it's all about change. Change management is a fundamental thing about any management, including data management, which I call it process, data, system, and ultimately people. You might have the greatest data quality, the greatest systems, but if you don't have people who are committed to this, you are not going very far with data quality. So thank you very much for your time. I worked in GE a long time back when Jack Welch was the CEO. And this was one of the favorite quotes of Jack Welch. I hope GE's culture is the same as it was when Jack Welch was there. Ramesh can say that in a few months. He's working with GE these days. And so thank you very much for your time. I see most of you are connected with me in LinkedIn. If you are not connected with me, this is where I'm very active on. Yeah, please connect with me. And if not, you can reach me via email. Okay. So in interest of time, I'll take 3 questions. If you still found this topic as a bit nerdy and yeah, Sana.
We talked a lot about the quality of data and the output and the so what. You mentioned something about the process of data as well, right? The process of measuring, the process of maintaining quality. And I've seen firsthand how you've done some of that work, which is love to hear if you had any comments on the process of data management, data quality, and how that can change and drive culture.
Yeah, the main thing which I look for is customer. So how is it impacting your customer? And when particular data is who is using that data. So if the customer is left out of the equation, you are not going very far with your any initiatives, including data quality. So put the customer in the middle of whatever you do. If the customer is left out, then all this initiative sooner or later they will fail. So that's the key of all these initiatives. So to this question. I was discussing with somebody from HR, and they said, I told them, put the customer in the middle of what you do. They said, oh, we are not working with customers. That's a sales team which is working with customers. I said, no, everybody is working with a customer. So when you talk for you, it could be an employee with whom you are serving. He's a customer. So customer doesn't mean somebody who's paying money for your product and services. It's anybody to whom you are serving. Come up with the service mentality. So if you have that service mentality, then you'll go very far with data analytics. And if you have a paying customer, still better. Ash.
Yeah, my question is for the DARS framework, what are some tools that companies can leverage to put the framework into action? So for example, data observability tools. If you see there's data lakes and your data quality is drifting, what are some tools or steps you can take?
You know, the first thing which I said is about measurement and see where those issues are happening. Now, The second thing is where do you want to fix it? So let's take, just to simplify things, you go to the transaction system, the system of record, you can fix the issues there. Say with MDM, and as soon as the customer is originated, we create that entity in MDM and try to fix it. Or else you can go a little bit further and try to fix it in the data warehouse using semantic layer and all this. So there is a bunch of options which you have. For example, if you look at MDM, for instance, in my experience, Dan, I don't know whether you'll agree with this or not, MDM is a very easy concept to explain and sell actually in the company, but it's very hard to implement. But on the other hand, say, for example, many companies, even though I was in P&G, which had the best master data management practices of all the companies I worked for, but it was all centrally controlled from Brussels. But you can't say that, hey, that takes 3 days to do it, but the customer is waiting here. I have to create this order and get things moving. So you can't wait for 3 days to happen. So many times you just bypass the process and make it happen. But in companies like P&G and Shell, the process is pretty robust. You can make this happen because it's all driven top down from the head office. But in many companies where you have like a democratic setup, this MDM might not work. So you have to be a little bit flexible and make things happen. So there's other options to integration, semantic layer, and other things. But it doesn't mean that, basically there is not like one answer to fix data quality. This is the way to do it. It all depends on your culture. The first thing is belief in that measurement. And companies which don't believe in the concept of measurement using data will not go very far with this. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah. Last one, Vinay. I don't have an idea, but I'll tell you a related aspects to this. So when I started my career, when I started consulting, most of the projects which I got, or gigs I got, was through the IT department. But of late, in the last 5+ years or so, from 2014, most of the work which I've been getting is through the business, like the supply chain, CFOs. They are coming to me for help. So I think the work of the IT department these days, I see, is going more towards storage and compute and all the infrastructure-related things. But the data itself is, I think, is moving more towards business. Business has decided, especially the CFO's office, is taking more lead in this thing. And many times I've seen that the CIO actually reports to the CFO as well. Bhaskar, last one. Yeah. Yeah.
So in this case, how do you maintain the data? We don't know what we don't know.
Yeah. So this context about second-party data and analytics is all about it starts with the questions which you're asking. And how do you ask this question? There has to be some framework which you want to associate with, and that's where the KPIs come into the picture. So if you don't have the right set of KPIs, you don't ask the right questions, and that becomes that's a challenge, and that drives all other data management or data integration activities which are happening on the second-party data as well. Like, for example, if you take a tech company which is selling their products through Best Buy and Staples, for example. So I was working, let me give you a little bit of, be specific here. So I was working for a company in the New Jersey, New York area, and they were selling all their electronic devices through this third-party distributors and agents, for example. But these companies refused to share data with those with the parent company because they felt that, okay, this is the data they have about the customers, and giving the customer data to the main entity will kind of jeopardize their competitive position and relationship and all that. So you need to figure out what data you need, because sometimes that data might be very sensitive to the other company, which they might not willing to, they're not ready to share as well. Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much once again. So before Sana comes on stage, if you are a little bit tired about data and data quality and everything, we'll have a little bit of fun. We'll have Gary on the stage, and Gary is going to ask you something. Gary? No.
I wasn't on the agenda. I was supposed to be after you. So, okay, so who am I and why am I here? This is the three ships. Prashanth and I both Northwestern Kellogg MBAs, although I'm 73, but I feel like I'm 43. And then he contacted me 3-4 years ago, and that began the relationship. When I say three ships, it goes from relationship to partnership. Then he asked me to be an advisor to his firm. The third ship is friendship. You are a friend. I did help assist. How did Prashanth get this book with Wiley? I've authored or co-authored about 10 books with Wiley. And 9 years ago, I actually brought this one. So I thought I'd bring a copy, which I'm going to basically raffle off here. I don't know if raffle. So the technique, my undergraduate was in Cornell and University Industrial Engineering and Operations Research. So I'm pretty mechanical. So the question, and I'm going to do this, 3 groups, and you'll have to just shout out loud if you care to. How many books, number of books, has Prashanth published?
3.
No. Volume, quantity of the 3 books. Oh, we should have said of the 3 books, what's the quantity? 100,000.
200,000.
200,000. All right. You had enough time. What? 67,000. 10,000. Wait, the closest is going to get my book.
22,500.
20,000.
We're on 20,000.
20,000. This group. 35,000. Who said 20,000?
I said 22.5.
It'll be a little embarrassing. It's 6,000. But let me tell you, that is a lot of my books. It's typically not a huge number. You think authors make a ton of money? The book publisher is one. So you're going to get my book. And the fact that we're both Greek boys.
And both authors. That's how I know I've also written books.
Hey, before Shana comes up, I just want to make one remark, something that's an observation. I believe in the past, the best executives and the best leaders had the best answers. Today, I don't think that's the case. Today, I think the best leaders and best executives have the best questions. There is too much complexity. There's too much volatility. There's too much uncertainty for them to rely on their gut feel or sixth sense or so-called intuition. You know, they need to create a culture of investigation and discovery with analytics and tolerance for making mistakes. You know, and the problem is, I was with SAS for 16 years, and before that, 15 years with Deloitte and KPMG. I saw managers get promoted further up. And unfortunately, all they did was manage more intensely, more spreadsheets, more org charts, you know. They really need, I think, leaders and managers. There's too many of them. I like to say, leaders without followers are just taking a walk in the park, you know. They have got to figure out how do you actually attract people. So that's my brief remarks. Thank you.
Dear esteemed guests, it is my great pleasure to be here today and share a little bit of my journey with Prashanth. As someone who's worked very closely with Prashanth over the years, I am feeling very honored to be here to express my gratitude for his invaluable contributions to my own professional career. Prashanth and I actually worked together at GE back in 2006. I was fortunate that he was my very first manager and professional mentor. And there are some key learnings that I have way back from those early days that have stayed with me throughout my days at Teach for India, McKinsey, Columbia Business School, and then most recently, the Bay Area VC-backed startup technology world. So thank you, Prashanth, but I'm just gonna share some of those learnings here today, many of which that have been already echoed by many of the folks in the room. First of all, I think you asked me, you instilled the importance of measuring what matters, because what what gets measured gets managed. And I think you said it, Steve, it's about asking the right questions. And that principle, guiding foundational principle, has stayed with me through so many decisions throughout this journey. The topic of the book is my second, data quality, the importance of data quality, and the importance of converting data into information that you can do something with, the so what of decision making. Just the way that impacts the work that you do, the way that you interact with people, the so what, keeping that right front and center. And then, most importantly, Prashanth has emphasized the value of a high accountability system, high quality accountability system, and the impact. I've seen that firsthand, the impact that it can have in creating a culture of excellence, of driving positive change. And many of you have had an opportunity to experience that in the run-up to this event, what it feels like to be on his team with him. Thank you, Prashanth. And congratulations, heartiest congratulations on your latest book. On behalf of Prashanth, I would like to thank all of you today here for being here with us. It means a lot that you were here to celebrate this milestone, and we're excited to have shared this moment with you all. A special thank you to all the immensely engaging guest speakers. I'm going to read out the list so I don't miss anybody here. Chris, Bill, Steve, Thiago, David, Ramesh, Stacy, Mike, Sanjeev. Thank you for sharing your insights, and we are grateful for your time and expertise. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors and partners for our generous support: Seller Data, Orion Governance, Grahasoft, Toric, AtScale, Arcelia, Autodesk, Astral Insights, BGV, EIAGG, Vectra Automation, Wiley, and CFO University. The list is much longer of all the people who support and continue to be fans of Prashanth. For these folks whose contributions have made this event possible, and we are deeply, deeply, deeply grateful for your partnership. We thank you all again for being here today with us, and we hope that you continue to support Prashanth and all his future endeavors. And please do remember to grab a signed copy of his book on your way out today. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Prashanth.
Okay, once again, thank you very much for coming. And we have dinner. Please, please network with others and enjoy the food. And looking forward to be in touch with you and working with you. And thanks again for all your support and help and everything.